My Lords, given the public interest and for the convenience of the House, I have decided to inform the House that the Clerk of the Parliament has today received notification from Lord Mandelson of his intention to retire from the House, effective from 4th February. I will formally notify this to the House tomorrow in the usual way. Tributes to the Lord Wallace of Tankernes.
As I understand it, the last time that titles were removed by Act of Parliament was around about the time of the First World War, when there were some supporting the other side. To me, getting rid of his title as Lord and one or two other miscreant peers, fine. But it's not the issue of the day. It absolutely is not the issue of the day. The issue of the day is that not only did this man breach cabinet confidentiality, but he leaked highly market-sensitive information. Let me tell you, when I was in the European Parliament and I was talking about the bond spreads, the width of bond spreads between Greece, Italy and Germany, when those bailouts happened, there was a massive, immediate market shift. I watched it. It was huge. Anybody that had that information, that had access to money and funds of the kind that Epstein did, well, if he made tens of millions out of it, he was lax. Because there was a chance to make hundreds of millions out of that trade. So quick was the shift in the bond spreads. That, it seems to me, must be bordering on criminal. There is no direct insider trading law for bonds in quite the same way that there is for stocks, and that's been the case since 1981, the Insider Trading Act. But it is highly sensitive market information. It is government secrets. I also wonder whether, in emails to Epstein, he talked about the security apparatus that exists underneath number 10 and at the heart of Whitehall. That is information that is of national security importance. And so I think there is reason to ask the question whether Mandelson has not broken the Official Secrets Act. And I'd like to know whether Lord Hermer would be happy and satisfied for a prosecution to proceed on that basis. I think it's that serious. So, fine, talk about removing the title, but that really is, I think, a very small part of something that is much bigger, much more serious, and I'm not even sure that we know the full story yet. By the way, my name was mentioned 37 times in the files, but just to repeat, I never met Epstein and I didn't go to the island.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I recognise the strength of feeling on all sides of the House, myself included, and the Government will of course keep members up to date. I commend the statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. The crimes of Jeffrey Epstein were truly terrible. Paedophilia, sex trafficking, child prostitution. It was an awful abuse of power. And it is, of course, a great embarrassment to our country that its most senior ambassador should have been caught up with a man like him. In this latest set of releases from the US Department of Justice, it's clearer than ever that theirs was a relationship built not just on affection, but on the transfer of money from Epstein to Mandelson's family and the transfer of information from Mandelson to Epstein. In some cases, this was apparently market-sensitive information that Mandelson only received by dint of being a member of the Labour government. So, of course, we welcome the belated announcement that there will be an investigation into Mandelson's conduct whilst he was a minister. But this should have happened long ago, and I say that because we know that in February last year, Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, wrote to the Cabinet Secretary explicitly asking for an investigation into the veracity of information contained in the Epstein papers about the sale of assets arising from the banking collapse and communications about them between Lord Mandelson and Mr. Epstein. That investigation never happened. In any case, I'm afraid the investigation announced today alone will not do. It is not enough to consider Mandelson's historic conduct. There also needs to be an investigation into his behaviour whilst he was our ambassador in Washington. Given that he abused his previous position, it is entirely conceivable that he abused his most recent one. For example, I understand that on the 27th of February last year, Mandelson arranged for the Prime Minister to meet Palantir, a client of Mandelson's company, Global Counsel. How many more such meetings were there? What other information was shared? We all have a right to know. Likewise, the government cannot hide from its responsibility in having made Mandelson its ambassador in the first place. This was a political appointment. It happened only because of political pressure. And so one of two things must be true, Madam Deputy Speaker. Either there was the most terrible failure of the vetting system, or the government chose to brush that vetting information away. And both are very serious. But the government must now be honest with us about which it was. And it seems very unlikely that the government's vetting system broke down entirely. Indeed, on the 10th of September, the Prime Minister told the House that full due process was followed during this appointment. Can it really be the case that this full due process did not pick up the extent of the relationship? On the 3rd of November, Ollie Robbins, the then Permanent Secretary at the Foreign Office, told committee back before Lord Mandelson was announced as the appointee, there was a process within the Cabinet Office to make sure that the Prime Minister was aware of Lord Mandelson and the issues around his appointment. We can confidently say that the relationship with Epstein was indeed surfaced. So the government knew that Mandelson had a long-maintained and unhealthy relationship with Epstein, and yet it continued with its appointment anyway. So the question is, Madam Deputy Speaker, who in number 10 knew what and when? And the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister has a duty to tell this House precisely what the Prime Minister knew when he made the appointment, to disclose the documents that the Prime Minister saw. And if the Prime Minister genuinely did not know, well, somebody must have done. Who was it? Was it his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, who is reported to have personally pushed the appointment? Was it the Deputy Prime Minister, who was then the Foreign Secretary, who would have been party to some of the information? It's just time for the government to be open and clear with us all. Something went very badly wrong with this appointment, Madam Deputy Speaker. It has caused very great embarrassment to this country. And it is time that someone took responsibility.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The person that has to take responsibility for their failings is Peter Mandelson. The Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster knows, because the process for political appointments, whether to ambassadorships or otherwise, was one that was set up under the previous Conservative government. It was a process that we inherited and have since updated. The Prime Minister has been very clear that the declarations of interest that were put forward by Peter Mandelson were not wholly truthful. When it became clear from the release of information that had not been the case, the Prime Minister moved swiftly to remove Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to the United States. On the first point that the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster made in relation to an investigation requested by former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, I can confirm to the House that his statement was incorrect. Former Prime Minister did ask the Cabinet Secretary to investigate to look for any particular documents that related, as he said, to the sale of RBS assets to JP Morgan. That investigation was undertaken. The Cabinet Secretary did respond to the former Prime Minister to confirm that no documents in relation to these questions were held by the government. Evidently, now that more documents have become available to the public and to the government, further investigations are now taking place.
Good morning.
Was someone wrong about Mandelson? Good morning.
Morning.
Are you embarrassed about Mandelson's actions?
Morning.
Who's to blame for bringing him back?
Good morning. Morning.
Was someone wrong about Mandelson? Good morning. Who's to blame for bringing Mandelson back? Are you embarrassed by his actions?
Morning, sir. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Who's to blame for bringing him back? Are you embarrassed by Mandelson's actions?